Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my May 2025 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. As always, I'm going to start with my nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you need to skip over anything, although I don't usually do spoilers, or if you need to go back to anything, all of that is down below. While you're checking that out in the description, please make sure that you're subscribed, because sometimes YouTube likes to unsubscribe people for funsies, and you know, like and leave a comment, why not? As a reminder, I will be updating my bingo board from hell as well as the prompts for Read Queer all year at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. In May, I read 17 things for a total of 5,681 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so about 2,715 of those pages were actually about 77 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 9 YA books, 7 adult books, and 1 middle grade book. I read 13 novels, 2 anthologies, and 2 graphic novels. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was contemporary, mystery thriller, and historical fiction, followed by nonfiction, horror, romance, science fantasy, and fantasy. If you adjust by page count, you can tell that the science fantasy was a chonker. Most of these books were from the library, but I did read 3 from NetGalley, 1 from Book of the Month, and 1 from an indie bookstore. I read 7 audiobooks, 4 paperbacks, 3 hardcovers, and 3 ebooks. The biggest chunk of my books were in the 300 to 399 page range, and the majority were published this decade. The majority of the authors were women, and over half of the protagonists were women. In terms of setting, just over half were set in the US, a big chunk were set in other worlds or the UK, but I also had reads set in Canada and Romania. In terms of diversity of subject matter, a bunch of these were intersectional, with some additional queer books, books to do with race and feminism, and a couple that had no diversity to speak of. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 3 3-star reads, 2 3.5-star reads, 6 4-star reads, 4 4.5-star reads, and 2 5-star reads. Let's start with our lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? Also, I'm going to try to do this fairly quickly because there are so many books on this list, which I've already talked about before because I do weekly wrap-ups and I do monthly wrap-ups. So if you want to hear me talk in depth about any of these books, you can check out my previous weekly wrap-ups. The playlist is always linked down below, and you can also just look at the last 4 wrap-ups. The first of my 3-star reads was The Hours. This is a book that I didn't really enjoy the writing style of, and by the end of it I could see how everything was connected to each other, but because I know nothing about Virginia Woolf and I haven't read her stuff before, this didn't really resonate with me. My next 3-star was a graphic novel, and this is the one that was set in Romania, and that was Leap. This is set at a contemporary and ballet school. So it's set at a dance school, but it has different tracks. One is classical, which would be ballet, and one is contemporary. And in this book, we get characters who dance both of those styles. Our main character is currently dating somebody who's in the other track, and she is closeted, therefore our main character feels like she has to be closeted, and it causes some issues. She gets a new roommate in this year that we're seeing, and that roommate has a crush on a teacher, which is not great because she's over twice her age. And various shenanigans ensue from there. Going into this, I had no idea this was set in Romania, so when I opened it up and I was like, Bucharest? I've been there! I got really excited about it. The last of my 3-star reads is Read Dangerously. Now, I would probably have enjoyed this more if I knew about this author's writing style previous to this, because there are at least 3 other books, I think, that were written before this that are kind of written in a similar memoir type of style. However, I thought this was going to be a book more about the topic that it's trying to cover, as opposed to this person writing letters to their long dead father, kind of about this topic, but also weaving in some memoir elements. On my 3.5-star reads, we have Tegan and Sara Crush. This is the second in the graphic novel series put on by Tegan Quinn, Sarah Quinn, and Tilly Walden. These graphic novels are interesting because we have these 2 twins, Tegan and Sara, based on these real twins, Tegan and Sara, but they're not actually the same people because these twins in the graphic novel are actually growing up in the current decade, whereas obviously Tegan and Sara grew up in, I believe, the 90s. I think they're about my age. So in the graphic novel, you have them using things like cell phones and using social media, and obviously that wasn't something that was really prevalent when the actual twins were growing up. Other than how incredibly weird that is to me that that was the choice that was made, I really enjoy these graphic novels, and I think I'm getting to learn a little bit more about the real Tegan and Sara, although it's hard to say how much of what's in this is actually factual. My other 3.5-star read is Famous Last Words. This one takes place in London, and the first point of view character we get is this woman named Cam, or Camilla. She starts the day absolutely normally, except for this is the very first day that she's going to be dropping off her child at daycare for the very first time, and she expected her husband to be with her for this because she's going back to work for the first time since giving birth, but she can't get a hold of him. When she's at work, she finds out from the cops that he is actually keeping some people hostage in a warehouse, and that's a whole situation. And then after that wraps up in not a very very complete way, the book flashes forward 7 years later, and she's trying to sell her house, but she can't do that because his name is on the deed, and she is trying to get him declared legally dead so she can do things like move. Our other point of view character is Niall, and he's the negotiator that tried to fix the whole situation in the warehouse, and we're also seeing him 7 years later because there's things about what happened that night that are not resolved and he's still trying to figure it out. This one was fast-paced and interesting, and there's a twist that I saw coming, but I really liked knowing that I saw it coming. It just kind of made me feel really good about myself. And of course I love a book that's a very bookish book, and because Camilla works in publishing and because her husband was a ghostwriter, that's definitely something that we get in this book. One of my 4-star reads, the first one being Consumed. This is a non-fiction book about consuming, specifically when it comes to fast fashion and clothing and the clothing industry. And I'm not gonna lie, at certain points of this I was like, oh, I've done some bad things by consuming these types of things in the past, or I felt, okay, compared to this person and how she used to consume fast fashion, I'm not doing that badly, but I could still improve by, you know, not. I'm not one of those types of people that actually buys a lot of clothing, with the exception of t-shirts. I really like t-shirts, especially if they have cool things on them, like Booknet Fest currently. So unfortunately I have a lot of t-shirts, and I really don't actually know what the ethical practices behind any of those companies have been. I know for certain some of them haven't been great. However, I did find out that a lot of people only use their fast fashion items like twice, and that's definitely not me. Everything in my collection I've used many, many times. My next 4-star read is Meet Cute Diaries. This is about a trans boy named Noah who is currently in a bit of a transitional phase because his family used to live in Florida. They're currently moving to California, but for the summer he's staying with his brother in Denver, Colorado, while the parents are trying to find a house in California. And his biggest thing is this Tumblr account that he's been running for ages called the Meet Cute Diaries, where it's just about these different trans people and how they met their significant others and the cute stories. And it's supposed to be all these anonymous submissions and that type of thing, but the truth is he writes them all himself. And somebody just came out with an expose being like, I'm pretty sure that these are all fake, and that's not great. And the whole reason he's been writing them in the first place is to give people hope for love, and he wants that to continue, so now he has to fake date this cute boy he has a crush on to make it look like all of the love stories were legit. That's not messy at all, is it? Next we have The Thrashers. This is about a group of friends who are called The Thrashers because the lead guy in this group of friends, this gang if you will, his last name is Thrashers. They've just decided that their whole friend group is called The Thrashers, and they're currently being put on the public opinion trial because somebody they knew and hung out with last year ended up taking her own life, and now the prosecution is trying to say that they criminally harassed her into doing that. Our main character and our point of view character in this is the one that doesn't really fit into the group. However, she's been best friends with Thrasher since like the 2nd grade, so she's been kind of strung along, but she's always wondered if she's going to end up being one of those people that's just kind of let go by the friend group at some point. And she's trying to figure out how she can prove that her and her friends had nothing to do with his death. This one had some twists and turns, some manipulation. It was interesting. I wanted to know what was going to happen. Next we have I'll Be the One. This one was fantastic. It's about a plus-size girl named Sky who is entering this competition, and basically you can either enter for voice, you can enter for dance, or you can enter for both. But if you enter for both and you don't make it into one or the other, then you don't make it through into the actual competition. Although her mother is all for her singing and continuing in that, her mother doesn't think that she should dance, especially not on camera, because she happens to be fat. However, Sky wants to go on this competition specifically to prove everybody wrong and to show that she is not only a phenomenal singer, but a phenomenal dancer as well. She ends up meeting new friends along the way. There's definitely people in the competition who are absolute assholes to her because of her size. And by random happenstance, she ends up being partnered at one point with Henry, who is basically a celebrity because his parents are famous. He's also a model, he's very good looking, and it turns out he can also dance, which is why he's in the competition. I will point out that this book is from 2020, so there were some HP references in it, and this is before everybody knew that Joanne was the absolute worst, so I give it a pass for that. Obviously the author had no way of knowing, but I just want to throw that out there because I know that there are many people that get really upset when they have those references. So if this sounds amazing, it is amazing. You just have to kind of ignore those little points. Next we have The Surviving Sky. This was the science fantasy that was a chonker because it was over 500 pages, or as I consumed it, about 18.5 hours on audio. This one takes place in a world where the actual Earth that people used to live on rages all of the time. So they've used this kind of magic to mold flora and fauna to actually create these floating discs that people live on above the surface of the planet. And occasionally when the planet calms down, they'll actually come down. And the wife in this situation, because we have a dual perspective between the wife and the husband, she doesn't have this magic. She can't do these magic things. But she is a historian, so she's trying to figure out what they can do to get people back down to the planet. Whereas the people with the magic, who are called architects, and her husband is one of those, and he's on the Council of the Architects, are trying all they can to let people survive on these floating ashrams. They haven't really talked to each other in about 7 months, because about 7 months ago he was like, okay, it's time for us to have a kid, and she's like, I'm pretty sure that you only want to have a kid because that makes you look better for the council, and I'm not doing that just for that purpose. I want to do that with you when we both actually want a child. This science fantasy situation was really imaginative. I don't think I've actually read anything quite like this before, and it goes in some wild directions. Next we have the horror book that I read, and that's The Pledge. At the very beginning of this book, our main character is in a situation that ends up being quite catastrophic because a few of his friends end up dead. He ends up killing somebody so that somebody doesn't kill him and his boyfriend. And then the bulk of this book takes place 2 years later when he's going off to university for the first time, and he has to kind of think to himself whether or not he's going to let people know that he kind of has this famous past. He also has a lot of mental health struggles because he is still struggling with the fact that he ended somebody's life, even though that somebody killed a couple of his friends and was trying to kill him and his boyfriend. He's also struggling with the fact that his mother is a famous author, and she used his tragedy and wrote it into a book so she could put based on a true story on the book, and it's selling really, really well. Unfortunately, this means it's super weird when somebody using the mask used in those books to commit murders on his school campus. Yeah, that's not a great thing. Now he feels like he's right back in that situation all over again, and he's trying to figure out why and to stop it. This one was fast-paced, and I just really enjoyed trying to figure out who done it, because you're given somebody pretty early on, but even I was like, but really? Is it really that person? Are we sure? On my 4.5-star reads, we have Murder in the Dressing Room, which is the first in a mystery series. This is the only one that's out currently, and I'm so excited to read the rest of them, because in this one, our main character is Misty Devine, and she's a drag queen who's trying to figure out who killed her drag mother. I really, really loved this. Firstly, this is written by somebody named Holly Stars, and Holly Stars also does the voice acting for it, and Holly Stars is a drag persona. I don't know what her name is out of drag, but it's just so fun to read another book where a drag queen is writing about drag queens. It's just great. This again was another one with lots of twists and turns where Misty and sometimes Jo, which is her alter ego, are trying to figure out who killed her drag mother and why. It's a little bit of a closed room situation. It had to be somebody who was in the dressing rooms, but does she really think that one of her drag friends did it? You'll just have to read it to find out. Next we have the book that I read at the very beginning of the month, and that's Wildwood Dancing. This one was really cool for me because I started listening to this because it was recommended by Jean, because she was recommending fae stories, and this one just so happens to be by one of her favorite authors. So I went into it knowing it was a fae story, but either she neglected to say or I completely forgot that she said that this also takes place in Romania. And let me tell you that not only does this have fae people, but it has the night people, which are definitely vampires. They just don't use that term in this book. And if you know anything about Romania, there's a certain very famous castle that was probably the castle that Bram Stoker used when he was creating Dracula, and I've been to that castle, so the whole time I was just like picturing that castle while I was reading this book, which was just so fun for me. This one is about 5 sisters who on the full moon always go over into the fae world, and they're very careful not to eat or drink anything while they're there, but they basically go to these dances together, and it's a really good time. However, when they're back in the mortal realm, they have people in their family who are not too interested in the fae people existing. They kind of want to eradicate them, which is just not great. This is one of those books where when I was listening to it, I was walking around and just wanting to yell at some of the characters because they were just so deeply unfeminist and just jerks, and I just wanted them to stop. And I love when a book makes me like that. Next is the book that I finished most recently, which is Sisters of the Lost Nation. This one takes place in about the 1990s, and it takes place concerning a fictional indigenous band. Basically, we're on reservation land for most of this, and there is a casino on the land which is bringing money in for the band. And our main character works there part-time because she wants the pocket money. Her family's not very rich, even though they started getting money together from the casino, from the per capitas. But as she's working there, she's noticing some weird things are happening on the 8th floor, and her boss just keeps being really, really weird about it. Additionally, there are these girls that keep going missing. There were a couple that went missing a while ago, there's one that went missing not too long ago, and as this story progresses, her sister also goes missing. This one at the very beginning I had a little bit of trouble grasping because we started when our character was 7, and then we flash forward to when she was 10, but then we would have basically day whatever, and it kind of didn't necessarily go in linear order. However, that got ironed out as we went on, so I wasn't as confused anymore, but I did get a little bit confused towards the beginning. I figured it out though. This one is a mixture of bullying because Anna goes to this high school and the people there aren't very nice to her because she's not exactly the most feminine presenting person, and as you continue on reading this, although this book is not used except for in the author's note, you come to the realization that Anna is probably Two-Spirit. In addition to that, you have the fact that she really wants the stories from her tribe to be kept and so that people continue to know about them, because there used to be a lady who did this and she died about 10 years ago, unfortunately, and Anna keeps going to her trailer, which is abandoned, and reading all of these old texts, and she wonders to her dad one day, why isn't there a preservation society? And her dad basically makes that her thing now, and she's like, well, I don't know how to do this, I'm a kid. Why don't you actually, you know, help me? I just asked a question. Obviously, this book being this late in the video, I really enjoyed it. Last for my 4.5 star reads is a book that actually comes out this week, and that's Nobody in Particular. This is another dual perspective book, and one of the characters is named Danny. Now, she is from America. However, her mother has just married somebody from a place called Henland, which is somewhere in Europe. It's a country that doesn't actually exist, but exists for the purposes of this story. It's actually a country that used to be part of England. However, they got their independence like 600 years ago, which explains why everybody speaks the same language. When she found out that she would be moving to Henland, she's like, oh, that school that I've always really fantasized about going to because I would get a very good education for my piano playing is there, but like, they would never accept me, right? But she puts in an application, she gets a scholarship, and she ends up going to this very prestigious boarding school. Our other point of view character is another student at the school. Her name is Rose, and she's the princess of Henland. And yes, this is a royal romance between these two, however, they have to keep it on the down low because, you know, homophobia, and Henland, as it turns out, is a majority Catholic country. Basically, since Rose realized at a younger age that she was a lesbian, she knew that she was going to have to end up marrying a man at some point, and she would probably end up just having lovers behind the scenes. Because I'm sure no member of any monarchy has ever had to do that before. However, this isn't really a situation that ends up working out too well for Danny, and that definitely causes some conflict. This book talks about consent and forced outings and privilege, and it's just so well put together. I sped through this in 2 days. I really enjoyed it. On to my 5-star reads, and speaking of books that are set in boarding school, we now have Come As You Are. This one is about a girl who ends up deciding she wants to go to boarding school, however it's still in America where she lives, and she decides that after finding her sister in bed with her boyfriend and finding out that her best friend knew about the whole situation. So she wants to remove herself from those 3 people and have a fresh start. However, her fresh start isn't turning out too well on the very first day because she shows up and they've put her in the boy dorms because she has a name that could definitely be interpreted as a boy's name, and obviously that's not going to work for her. However, there's really nowhere else to put her, so they end up opening this room that wasn't going to be used on the first floor because it's an accessibility room, and she ends up getting a single in a boys' dormitory. This is not great because a lot of the boys are douchebags about it and are just like, oh, you're just trying to see us naked in the showers and stuff like that, and she's like, I just was actually looking forward to like meeting other girls and having like a really good time and having that communal living aspect with girls, but now I'm in this really weird situation. She does end up making friends, and she does end up realizing that she really wants some of these friends to teach her how to be cool because she's always been on the straight and narrow, she's always been a good person, and these terrible things have happened to her, and her sister's always gotten everything she's ever wanted, so she basically is just like, teach me how to be better. And the first person she has to do this is like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. However, his roommate is like, well, if you can teach me to be good, I can teach you to be bad. And that's a situation that I very, very, very much enjoyed. Again, this is another one I read over a couple of days, and I actually read the majority of this on a nice patio, having a few pints and a really nice salad, and I felt for this character really, really deeply because she expressed a lot of things that she is feeling that I have definitely also felt. Needless to say, I would highly recommend this, and I would also really love another book in this universe. The last book on this list, and the one that I like the most, is called The Girl Who Came Home. This one is a historical fiction that has to do with characters who were on the Titanic. We both see points of view of people who were on the Titanic, and then we also see somebody in about the 1980s who comes to realize that her great-grandmother was somebody on the Titanic and she survived, and now she's telling her story. I've read a few books by this author before, and she always tends to have these dual timelines that I really enjoy. There were a couple of things in this book in particular that I was like, ooh, I'm pretty sure that I know how this exact thing is going to play out. Now, you didn't actually know that until the very end of the book, but because of a linguistic thing that I just happened to know, I was like, oh, that's going to be a thing, and it's going to be such a cool reveal, and it absolutely was. Also, when I picked up this book, I had no idea when it was published, and I really enjoyed that it was published back in 2012, which is the 100-year anniversary of that tragedy. It was also obviously very interesting to try to figure out who was going to make it out of that tragedy, because you knew at least one person did, but like, not a lot of people did. As for my prompts for Read Queer All Year, this is what the board looked like this month. For Asian Heritage Month, I read I'll Be the One, which turned out to be a buy for buy romance, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that because I'm being very, very quick, but that was the case. For agender rep, I used Meet Cute Diaries because somebody said it had agender rep, and it doesn't necessarily actually use that term on the page. Actually, it does use that term on the page, but the person in question doesn't necessarily decide that's the label for them. But we're just gonna go with it. For pansexual, I used The Surviving Sky. Again, this is another book where that word isn't really in their lexicon. However, I'm pretty sure it applies to at least one of the characters, so I'll go with it because, again, it was on a list of books that have characters who are pansexual, so I'm just gonna go with it. And then for mental health rep, I used The Pledge because, yeah, some PTSD for sure. As my bookish bingo board from hell, this is what it now looks like, and yeah, I could be doing better, but I'm not. The only updates from last month are another one for my 40 before 40 TBR, which was The Hours, another book box book, and another book of the month book, which was Famous Last Words. And because I've ordered 4 books, that ratio is now up 3 to 4, so I only have to read a couple more books to fix that ratio. But other than that, I haven't made any progress on the rest of this board, and I'm getting scared. I know at least a couple of books I'm going to read in June will count for things on this bingo board, but I think I will actually end up in July just trying to knock out a bunch of my 40 before 40 TBR because unfortunately that deadline is really coming up soon. If you want to hear me talk more about these books or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. If you've read any of these or you now want to read any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!